Did you know that there is a formula that will tell you exactly when your company is going to hit a revenue ceiling? That's right. On today's episode of We Do the Work, we are talking about the Growth Ceiling Calculator. Let's dive in. We Do the Work is dedicated to those who believe in the tenacious pursuit of their dreams. In a world where we aim to turn ceilings into floors, we dive deep into the essence of health, wealth, and relationships, uncovering that true fulfillment lies not in our achievements, but in the journey of us doing the work. Everyone wants to talk about how to get new customers. That is the chocolate of business. Nobody wants to talk about retaining customers. That is the broccoli of business. And I'm here to tell you the best businesses focus on retention. Retention is just the percentage of customers that you keep. When we talk about attrition or churn, that's the percentage of customers that you lose. And you have to know what these percentages are, because the higher your retention and the lower your attrition, the higher your customer's lifetime value will be. And that's really where the magic happens. We get more revenue, we get more referrals, and we get happier customers. I don't think a lot of business owners truly understand how just a 1% shift in churn, going from 5% to 4 or 4% to 3 or 3 to 2, can have such drastic impacts on their bottom line. In some cases, not just adding tens of thousands of dollars in revenue, but hundreds of thousands of dollars in revenue. This is very top of mind for me. As the CEO and visionary of GrowPro, I have felt a little bit like a failure for about a year. And in the past year, we had some amazing things happen. We went from 23 team members to 33 team members. We launched new programs and services. We've expanded our leadership team. We expanded our sales team. We achieved some amazing awards, such as we made the Inc. 5000 list 2 years in a row. But the one thing that had stopped growing was our bottom line. Back in March of 2023, we hit a very big milestone in the company. And I'm not telling this to you to brag. I'm trying to lay the foundation of where we were and just why focusing on retention was so important. So back in March of 2023, we hit the milestone of 250,000 MRR, monthly recurring revenue, which means your company is at a $3 million run rate. This was a huge deal. It was a target we were aiming for, but it was also a huge turning point in the company. They call the 3 to 5 million range in businesses the black hole. And I was told by numerous mentors that things were going to change, that our problems were going to get different. And honestly, I ignored them. I thought that my work ethic was unbeatable, thought that we had the systems in place and that anything thrown our way we would overcome, which we eventually did. But it took 9 months for us to figure out what the exact problem was and then implement a game plan to overcome it. Now, one of our core values at GrowPro is continuous growth. We continually grow for the company, client, and self. And one of our cultural values is forever forward. We're forever moving forward. So when 9 months later, we were still hovering at around that $250,000 mark, I wasn't really feeling like we were growing or we were moving forward. And we were at about a 5% attrition rate for the year. And in the social media marketing industry, the average industry churns about 10%. So we were less than half the average, but it wasn't good enough. I didn't just want to be good. I wanted to be the best. And I wanted to aim for hitting a 3% attrition. So I learned about this growth ceiling calculator back in December of 2023. And When I learned the formula and plugged our numbers in, the light bulb instantly went off. And based off of that calculation, it proved to me that there was a reason why we weren't growing past $250,000. So we did the calculation, we implemented some new retention strategies such as building customer success timelines and implementing customer health index scores. And here we are 6 months later at $310,000 MRR. That's $60,000 a month added to the bottom line, and over the course of the year, $720,000. And all we had to do was focus on lowering that churn just a little bit. Now, if you've been following me for a while, I always say math is the path. And that's because we have to be making data-driven decisions in our business. The best businesses know their numbers, and the best businesses have low customer churn. And when you know your numbers, you can kind of create like a sensor system, kind of similar to if there was a flood in your house, you could have sensors go off, or the smoke alarm would go off, or the alarm system if somebody broke in. These sensors are going to allow you to know when you are about to have a retention issue so you can get ahead of it. And, you know, it might be common sense, but there are companies out there that are churning 10% of their customers every month. And if you do the math, if you're churning 10% of your customers in 10 months, you just went through 100% of your customers. That's crazy. So what should we be aiming for when we talk about attrition or churn? Well, it's different for every industry. So you need to do some research on your industry and figure out what is the average attrition rate. What is the average amount of people that we should be churning? And I don't know about you, but I don't want anything in my life to be average. I want to be the best. So once you know that number and then you figure out what your attrition rate is, you're now going to have a sensor system that will let you know if we need to make some changes. If you're not sure how to figure out your churn, it's a very simple calculation. You're just going to take the number of cancellations that you had in a month, and you're going to divide it by the number of customers you started with at the beginning of the month. So, for example, let's say you had 12 customers cancel in a 1 month period, and at the start of that month, you had 215 customers. You'd simply divide the 12 by the 215, which would give you a 5.58% attrition rate. And you want to look at this on a month-to-month basis. When your churn starts creeping up, you're ultimately going to end up feeling like a hamster on a wheel with your growth because it's not improving. And it typically doesn't matter how many customers you're signing up. Marketing and sales aren't going to fix the retention issue. So you've got to know your numbers if you really want to go from good to great. And it starts with knowing what your churn percentage is. So because math is the path, I want to share this really cool tool with you called the Growth Ceiling Calculator. Now, in most businesses that are starting to scale, this is typically what ends up happening. We start to grow, we're starting to gain more customers, and then ultimately we start to flatline and plateau. And when that plateau hits, the one thing that we typically don't consider is what is happening on the other end of the graph as cancellations increase. So we want to make sure that we are able to retain as many customers as possible so we don't have to worry about trying to outsell our cancellations. Now, I told you that there was a formula that if you have a couple of numbers, you can figure out what your growth ceiling or your revenue ceiling is. So what those numbers are, you need to know the number of customers that you have in your company. And then you need to know how many new customers are you getting each month? From there, we're going to figure out the average customer value each month. And then we need to know the percentage of churn per month. And if you know these four numbers, you will be able to figure out what the revenue ceiling your company will eventually hit. Now, these four numbers are non-negotiable numbers in my opinion. So back when I did this for the first time in December of 2023, at the time, we had about a 625 customer value, and we had a 5% attrition rate. So $625 client value, customer value with a 5% attrition rate. Now, if you take your customer value and you divide it by your attrition rate, and we're going to put that in decimal format. So if I take the 625 and divide it by 0.05, this is going to give me a number called my lifetime value. And in this case, the lifetime value was $12,500. Now, once you know what the lifetime value is of your customer, you can take that lifetime value and you can multiply it by the average number of customers you are signing up each month. So with a $12,500 lifetime value, if I take that same number and I multiply it by 20 new customers a month, this gives me my revenue ceiling, which guess what that number is? The $250,000 that we were stuck at. Kind of crazy. So there are a couple of different ways that we can increase this revenue ceiling, this growth ceiling. We can increase the value of our customers. We can increase the number of new customers, or we can lower the attrition, the churn. And we have to remember that there is a cost that comes with acquiring new customers. You have marketing costs, you have sales costs. There really aren't any costs other than your time and effort to lower your churn. So once we implemented some new retention strategies such as the success timeline and the customer health index scores, we were able to lower our attrition from 5% down to 3%. We lowered it 2 whole percentages. Now, 2 is not a very big number unless you're talking about percentages and you're dealing with large dollar amounts. So with this new attrition rate of 3%, let's check out what the revenue ceiling is now. Even if nothing else changes, we've got the $625 client value, and now instead of a 5%, we have a 3% attrition. What this gives me is a much larger lifetime value of $20,833. Now, to finalize the formula, I'm going to take that lifetime value of $20,833, and even if we don't sign up any more customers than we're doing on average, those 20 customers, this now puts our revenue ceiling at $416,666. Much, much higher than the $250,000 we were stuck at before. So by simply lowering our attrition rate from 5% down to 3%, it added hundreds of thousands of dollars to our bottom line. Now, my challenge to you is to figure out what your growth ceiling calculation is. And all you need to do is take your client value, divide it by your attrition, and that's going to give you your lifetime value. Then you're going to take your lifetime value and multiply it by your average number of new customers, and that is going to give you your revenue ceiling. It's going to let you know that your company will not grow further than this number. So once you have that formula, you're either going to be close to the ceiling, you're going to be above the ceiling, or you're going to be below the ceiling. If your current revenue is close to your growth ceiling number, you have to focus on lowering your attrition rate, as it's the easiest and most cost-effective way to increase your revenue. If your current revenue is higher than the ceiling, that means that your revenue is going to eventually drop down to the ceiling. That's the sensor system going off saying, Houston, we got a problem. If your current revenue is lower than the ceiling, that means that you still have some room to grow. So like I said before, math is the path. I want you to go out, figure out what your growth ceiling calculation is, and then get to work. And if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to this channel and be sure to check out my episode on the 5 biggest marketing mistakes to avoid. We'll see you in the next one.